This is the United Uprising channel. Welcome to today's show. I want to cover this story about what occurred in Rochester, New York, because it's important to note why everything makes the news. That's what we all have to always remember when a story's out there. They do not and will not waste a second if they can't tie a narrative into it in promoting the story. Because events occur, that's what you have to remember. Events occur every single day, right? There's always going to be car accidents. There's always going to be things that happen around you that don't make the news, but they might make a news article, right? If it makes national news, there's a reason behind it. And there's underlying narratives to all of it, every single story. Even if the event actually happens, they will create a narrative around the event in order to manipulate you and manipulate your thoughts. That's the whole purpose of the news. It builds a false reality in your mind to herd you where they want to herd you, right? So you probably heard there's a deadly Rochester crash, which is now being investigated as a domestic terror act. The driver allegedly left a note and a journal, right? So first you find out about the crash, right? You're probably like, oh, okay, this is a little, because anytime we hear about a note and a journal and then they say it could be domestic terror, we'll automatically have to assume the weapon being used is the weapon that they don't want you to have, right? That's how you immediately know it's a false flag. In this situation, it very well could be a very true story. It could have happened this way. And then they like to at least add to the story and say, well, there was a note. There was a note and there was a journal, because they have been doing this for a few years now, revolving around car crashes, okay? So bear with me, because I've been talking about this for 6 or 7 years now, even though I'm brand new to YouTube, wink, wink, okay? And what I've been talking about is when we talk in correlation with all the things they're trying to do with smart cities and cars and having you go electric, ultimately it's about driverless vehicles. So you may recall, refresh your memory, because it's been programmed into you already, okay? Does everybody remember a few years ago the incident that occurred in Charleston where the man plowed his car into an anti-racism protester parade? There was a march going on. They say the car rammed into a crowd of people who protested against white nationalists. So they're saying a white nationalist took his car and used it as a weapon. I'm sure you all remember it. How about the story about the parade on Christmas back in 2021 when Darrell Brooks Jr. drove his SUV through an annual Christmas parade? Remember that? Do you remember the terror incident in London where somebody used their car as a weapon over there? These are all things that have happened in the last couple of years, and you might have just said, oh, those are things that just happens with somebody with a car. But if ultimately they want all of us to be in vehicles that they can control, this is how they start pushing that narrative. Now, we know that Gen Z is afraid to drive, right? They're making people afraid to drive cars. They're making people very, very, very non-independent. They're making them only independent on government and technology to take care of all their needs. This is something that obviously is fully under their control. So when we hear this story and then they start tying it into, oh, there could be, domestic terror, there's a note, you know where it's leading, right? The story that's going to come out will be something tied in with him being a conservative, a Republican, etc. Because again, they need to change the viewpoint on what a terrorist is. This is how they're going to divide this country, build civil unrest, destroy the Constitution, destroy everything that we know as normal in this country, which no longer is in place. This is no longer a republic. So these are all things that we'll find out in the manifesto, right? Because every one of these events, the guy now seems to have a journal, right? Because all these crazy people just have journals. They're taking their time to write journals out, and everybody just believes it. Well, the whole purpose of them having manifestos and journals is so that they could build something in your mind psychologically of who a threat is in this society. And every time it's the same thing. The guy's a conservative. The guy's a conservative. Occasionally they'll throw you a little loophole, right? What we had in Tennessee earlier in the year, where we had, the whole thing at the school in Tennessee and the person flipping their gender. And that's the gaslight. Right, they do that to gaslight the other side by occasionally throwing it out and then giving them, oh, they get special treatment in the media. They don't cover that in the media. Again, these are all gaslighting tactics. Remember, they've mastered psychological war. So everything they do is a war on our minds, right? It's a war on our minds. So here's the story. Now, keep in mind all the stuff I just said to you about all these other events that have happened around, whether it's this is a New Year's Eve thing, right? The other was a Christmas parade. The other was a march, a protest, right? Places where Large groups of people gather and people are using their cars as weapons, right? We always hear about that certain weapon that they don't want you to have being used. Well, the car is another one that they constantly use for the same reason, because eventually, once they get you in electric vehicles, it's going to be driverless. That is a huge thing to remember, because people go, oh, it's just about getting us electric to make money and go green. It's about controlling every aspect of your life, including where you can and cannot go, how you get there or there, because you're going to be in prison. You're not going to be able to roam freely anymore on this earth. They want to control every aspect of your movements, right? The only way they're going to get people and convince people to go electric, to then eventually go driverless, is to gaslight people with more and more of these events with cars. Now, I'm not saying that this event didn't actually occur, but I'm saying even if this was a real thing that happened, they have just hijacked the story to build their narrative into it, because that's what they do. So you hear about a deadly car crash in Rochester, and they say, well, now it's being investigated as domestic terror. Driver allegedly left a note and a journal. So then people go, wow, and he used his car to do this to innocent people. That could be me walking on the sidewalks. Boy, cars are really dangerous, because somebody could just be a really bad person and have a car and then use their car as a weapon. It's just as dangerous as a gun, right? Now, you never hear any of the stories about knives and banning knives, do you? Of course not, right? Because they couldn't really get everyone to ban knives. Maybe eventually one day they'll tell you that we should all use plastic paper knives that can't penetrate like prisoners, but they know if they say that right now, people will be a little suspicious about cutting their meats, etc. But you won't have meat eventually, so everybody will be on board to be like a prisoner with a plastic butter knife that they can't stab anybody with. That's what it's going to be like. Everything's going to be removed, okay? So cars are on the list. And here's the story about what happened in Rochester if you didn't hear. A deadly crash outside a New Year's concert in Rochester, New York, is being investigated as domestic terror after the suspect allegedly left a note and journal in his hotel room. The suspect has been identified as Michael Avery from Syracuse, might as well be called George Glass or John Doe. And his family has been interviewed by investigators. The FBI's Joint Task Force on Terror is investigating after two vehicles, one laden with gas canisters, crashed and plowed into a crowd outside the concert at the Kodak Center, killing 2 and injuring 5. Revelers were walking on a crosswalk outside the venue around 12:50 a.m. Monday when a Ford SUV slammed into a Mitsubishi Outlander that was leaving a nearby parking lot. Rochester Police Chief David Smith said at a news conference Monday the force of the crash sent the vehicles through a group of pedestrians who were on the crosswalk. 2 passengers in the Mitsubishi were killed, and the driver was taken to a hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. The Ford driver was also hospitalized. Then it goes on to say at least a dozen gasoline canisters were found. The crash ignited a fire that took firefighters nearly an hour to extinguish. Once the flames were out, first responders found at least a dozen gasoline canisters in and around the striking vehicle. Based on the danger level associated with these, the Rochester Police Department bomb squad and the Joint Arson Task Force responded. So that's where you start hearing this, right? This narrative start to change. Okay, so then you go, oh, guy crashed into a crowd. Maybe it was a drunk driver. Maybe he was texting and driving, which is like the most dangerous thing on earth these days. But that's where your brain goes first, right? So this could have naturally occurred, and it could have taken them a matter of 12 hours to say, hey, they have a list, okay, of things that if they could check it off, they could take the story, make it a national story, and then plant seeds in your head about what change needs to occur. So what does this story do when you hear it, right? If you heard it, like if you drive on the highway and you see a car crash, you probably just look and don't think anything more about it as you go about your day, right? But when it's pumped into your head through the media, then you start to go, okay, wow, these people were just at a concert. I love to go to concerts. I could see, I always go to concerts. Okay, I was just walking they were just walking, you'll hear the stories of the victims, etc. Oh, they were just walking on the sidewalk with their family member. They just had a newborn at home and they went out for the night to go celebrate the new year and somebody hit them, right? But this wasn't just an accidental hit. This was a targeted hit because now the vehicle is a weapon and crazy people are putting gasoline in there. Everybody's unhinged. We need the government to get more control of the civilians. And cars are a weapon because people are freely using their cars and doing this stuff. So we need to take that away. Now, when I talk about this stuff, people roll their eyes. And I understand why, but you have to start peeling the onion back. And you have to understand if they want to get you to this point, right? Everyone out there just like now we hear people finally talking about smart cities, right? We see even the alt-right will bring up smart cities, the alt-right controlled media. They never talk about how they can get civilians on board with these ideas, right? They have to create false flags psychologically to make people want to go to that. So there's a lot of things that have to occur. But you never hear about how they could start taking away, not just going from gas to electric to driverless. Because the whole purpose is for us to live outside of an actual cell with bars on it that we envision in our heads, but to live in this society as it is, imprisoned. So you won't have any free range. You will not have free range of motion. You will not be able to get in a car and go drive and see your uncle in Idaho. You will not have that opportunity. You will be completely it will be off the board of ideas or notions or possibilities. Okay. And they want control of every aspect. So a story like this could really occur, and they take the story and then they start putting a narrative around it. Because everybody who hears this story, they hear domestic terror, they're like, okay, what's going on here? Oh, he put gasoline in his car. He used his car as a weapon and he killed all these pedestrians walking the street. Well, that's not safe. What if some crazy white nationalist gets their car and they go to some event where there's all liberals there and they start crashing their cars, right? This will get more, because the liberals are the ones being targeted for the smart cities, because they know conservatives won't. Conservatives are going to be targeted in different ways and hurted in different ways. Like I've been talking about, getting conservatives into red states that are going to get drilled with all sorts of things, weaponized weather, potential World War III with the red states. Whereas the blue slave states, once you go in these states and commit to these states and smart cities, you never get out. Okay, they're going to be just your prison for the rest of your life. And they've shown us predictive programming in so many movies with domes and these people being locked in and wondering what the outside world is like. Okay, but don't think for 1 second the conservatives aren't going to be hurted too, because they are, and they're falling for it hook, line, and sinker. So back to the story. Now what we're going to hear is about manifestos that come out and things like that. And all the checkpoints are going to involve the same talking points if you're new to this, okay? I talk about it on the website, Uprising Revival, every time an event like this occurs. Conspiracy theorist, right? He dabbled in conspiracies online. He got unhinged. He was targeting the band maybe because he saw a conspiracy theory on the band or the people who watch the band. We'll see where it goes. But you'll hear the word conspiracy theory. You will hear it because they're doing their best, which is this is not going to stop, to plant seeds and make everybody out there think that people who once were called conspiracy theorists, that people would laugh at and roll their eyes as if they're now a terror threat. And this is eventually to imprison us, to do all sorts of things with us, unless we actually give in and change the way that we think, which we will not do. I will not personally do. And that's what they have to build in everyone's minds, that we're dangerous threats, right? This is how you start getting your communist, globalist government in place, is having the civilians prop up the government higher than they prop up their own family. And that's what you see. That's what people never talk about with the Democrats. The party can do no wrong. Doesn't matter what comes out about the party. Doesn't matter about collusion, treason, all sorts of disgusting acts. That's why Biden's the perfect person to set this precedent, because we've seen all the creepy, gross stuff that he's done, groping, diaries of his daughter coming out. It's all done by design. It's done by design so that these people there's nothing that they'll be able to hear that will make them so disgusted with their party that they'd abandon the party. Nothing, because we've already seen so many disgusting, disturbing things. The government pretty much saying, we'll do whatever we want. We'll open the borders. We'll, pretty much arrest citizens. We'll take away free speech. And these people are on board with it because, for a lot of reasons, which I don't need to get into about bashing, these people. They're not really human at this point. Let's put it that way, right? So this story is interesting to note because at the same time, if you do a search of driverless vehicles, right, you'll start seeing some of the undertones of the driverless vehicle narrative. Right, because it's out there and they're pushing it. Driverless cars immune from traffic tickets in California under current laws, right? A lot of the articles out there about self-driving cars, what states are going to implement self-driving cars, what states are allowing it, what states are promoting it, driverless trucks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Underlying themes. These stories always have one. So go back to the beginning of everything I talked about here, right? The common person cannot wrap their heads around what I'm talking about. They just think that this stuff is automatically happening. They don't think for 1 second how many car crashes occurred, okay? How many car crashes occur every day? And why do they not make the main story of the news every day? Because they can't tie an agenda to it. You probably passed one in the last month, right? Did that make the news? No, it probably didn't make the news. Could it have made the local news maybe for 5 seconds? Maybe the traffic alert. So why this one? Well, because this one was targeted, right? And they go, well, that's the difference between that one and that one. Well, not necessarily. The difference is that this story specifically they can use as a means of programming you into thinking that driving cars is dangerous and unsafe, and that the government needs to regulate who can drive cars, who can we even consider safe to drive a vehicle. This person has dangerous ideologies. The car they could use as a weapon. I could be walking the streets with my family and I could get run over in a city. Well, guess what? In a city, you won't have people driving cars anymore because it'll all be connected via technology with, what do they call it? What is the World Economic Code? They're, pretty much their global governance of technology. They're artificial intelligence-based cities. And that's, there are people have no independent freedoms inside of these. They're under full control. It's full on, it's not even slavery. It's full on, it's slavery of the mind, the flesh, everything. It's full on total control. There's more freedom, believe it or not, in an actual prison cell than there would be here. Because even in the prison cell, a guy could do something to someone else. They can get in a fight. You ain't going to be able to do nothing without being regulated in these smart cities and in this new society they're trying to create. So when I saw the story, it just reminded me of all these other ones I've covered, right? So just think to yourself, because you probably hear it and you go, oh, okay, it's probably a real thing. Oh, there's a terror thing behind. The second you hear domestic terror journal, these should be triggers that you automatically go false flag, or they're going to turn it into a psychological operation on your mind with the narratives that they put behind the story. Then you start thinking, remind yourself, oh yeah, wasn't there a thing at a Christmas concert where Darrell E. Brooks drove his car? Yes, there was. How about Charleston? Oh, yes, there was. And then if you actually look up, there's even Wikipedia pages, vehicle ramming attacks. Okay, they want this stuff out there. The terror incident in London where the car crashed near Parliament, cars with bombs, using cars as weapons, because they eventually have to remove the car. How else are they going to get people to give up their freedoms of driving a car unless they psychologically convince you that cars are dangerous, that human beings freely driving them is dangerous because they have dangerous political ideologies and they need to be stopped and contained? That's what this stuff is all about. And every single story has a narrative under it. Whether you want to believe it or not, it's the truth. And you'll see, because you'll become desensitized to these things as they keep happening. You have to remember in your head all these stories, how they gaslight these stories, how they spin these stories, how they take these stories, and then what are they trying to do? Right? Just answer, what are they trying to do? Well, if you understand how smart cities work and global governance works, you ain't driving a car. And it's a slow transition, because once you give up gas and you go to electric, right, you start giving up your freedoms because you can't go cross country. You got to park. You got to do all this stuff. Your carbon footprint, you're giving up how far you could possibly go. And eventually you give up that too because you won't be driving in these. That's their goal ultimately, is that you're living in like a monorail, like in Disney. And all these people are going to think it's wonderful because they're like, I love Disney. The monorail, that's so cool. I go to work in the monorail. Oh my gosh, Yeah. I can go to grandma's in a monorail. Right? And they don't realize they're just giving up their rights. And they are going to be under totalitarian control. Tongue twister to end the story. I thank everybody for being here. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hope you're all well. God bless all of you and your families.